That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome back to that podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week, and especially this year, and especially this episode, we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This, friends and foggers, is the fear of God. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And guys, he was here, but he looked a little worse for wear. He said he was having a case of the alone at night willies, and he kind of stepped away. And I'm sure he'll be fine. It has been a tough year. We've probably all had, trouble sleeping off and on this year. I'm sure that's what the alone at night willies means. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you, constant listeners, into our big tent series for the year, What Scares Us / What Saves Us, a series defined by you. You've been submitting your stories of films and media that instilled a certain fearful imagining in you, and we are going to be covering them right here on the show. 2 weeks ago, we started this series with Dr. Readinstein's very own Pumpkinhead entry and submission. Last week, we had the good fortune, a frequent guest and friend of the Fog, Vera Gowdy, serve as both MC and maybe a bit of a therapist as well, as we all dove 47 meters down. So be sure to check out both of those episodes. We do have a very special listener submitted episode for you here today as well, but I'm getting ahead of myself, unsurprisingly. As you well know, here at The Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain. Except for right now, when I explain that you can listen to The Fear of God at your nearest podcast platform. You can watch The Fear of God on YouTube, and you can browse The Fear of God on the web at thefearofgodpodcast.com, where you'll find Reed. Hey, buddy. You freshened up? You little shot of caffeine or espresso or something? You all right?
Hi, I'm Lackey. Want to play?
Ooh, that's not cool. That's not cool.
Don't do that. Don't
That's
do
not
that.
cool,
No,
no.
put that back in the box.
Yeah.
Not one of the good guys. No.
Throw that off a bridge somewhere. Not one of the good guys. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing? Everything going well?
I'm good.
Good.
Enjoying this series. We got a brand new entry today.
There's some exciting. This series wound up being, and listeners obviously don't have the line of sight to everything that's coming forward, but this series wound up being pretty eclectic, and there's a handful in here that we're going to get to that I have to say I've been curious when we would eventually get to them. Today's episode is among that list, where I was like, you know what, we've been doing this 4 years. There's some big tentpole staples that we still just haven't made it to, and some of those are going to come up in this series. So I'm very excited about that. That's really cool.
Well, that's a very good segue, fellow co-host, to a little bit of business time.
Oh, that's a good idea.
We when we made the pitch for What Scares Us entries, one of the spokes on that wheel was digestibility. We're getting a little older, little digestive system don't work quite as well as it might have used to.
Need a little Metamucil.
And so in the spirit of that, a particular couple of listeners submitted, TV shows. Thanks, guys. But we wanted to rise to the challenge here. So we are letting you know multiple weeks in advance here that, and we can suss out the details and know more later. It's either 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, maybe.
Yeah, a couple of weeks from now.
Of weeks from now, we are going to be discussing the first season of the show Channel Zero, which is a worthy submission to What Scares Us, if ever.
It's so terrifying.
Submission. My gosh, that show's scary.
Yes.
It's an anthology series, so you don't need any sort of thing beyond just the first season. It's 6 episodes that are about 45 minutes or so each. So giving you ample heads up here to know what we're covering a couple of weeks from now. In addition to that, so what's
real quick, just for listeners who may be curious, the easiest and quickest place to find Channel Zero is on the streaming service Shudder, where they have all 4 seasons available, but especially season 1. I believe season 1 is available elsewhere, but I think the fastest route is through Shudder. So maybe a free trial, or if you already subscribe there, it is located there to stream. So
Yes,
anyway,
all seasons of Channel Zero are available on Shudder. We will exclusively be focusing on season 1, but if you're just in the mood to, just jump back into Poop Club, have fun with the rest of the show as well. I personally have not seen season 4, but I've seen season 1 through 3, and they are all worthy entries.
Yeah,
so that's
they're all strong.
Yes, that's in a couple weeks. What other business time? You got anything else you want to talk about for business time?
I would just toss out, if anybody hasn't and has been thinking about it, time is, just because of programming logistics, even though we have weeks and weeks left of the series, if you want to fit your What Scares You entry in for possible consideration, time is probably running short on that, because we have enough submissions to fill out the next few months, and we're going to be pivoting middle of the year. So if you would like your What Scares You entry considered, go to thefearofgodpodcast.com, click on the banner on the top, share a story about what scares you. That's also applies if you just want to share a story with us about something that we have already covered, or something that's just, we've been getting a lot of listener submissions that are just fun anecdotes from frightful events in their childhood that has been really fun to read. So feel free to share stories of that nature with us. But if you are wanting to use the platform to pitch us something to cover, time is probably running a little short on that for this exercise. So you'll want to do that in the next couple of weeks if you want us to be able to include your entry into this round. I'm not saying we'll never do it again, because I should mention that event, that opportunity will probably be available for years to come. This is a good avenue for people to just say, hey, Fear of God hosts, why don't you cover this? And this is probably the easiest way.
Maybe a little more warm than that, but yes, the idea is,
tell us why.
Good. As always, come join the Facebook Fear of God group. We have a fun old time discussing all things fearful and otherwise in there. As always, if you have not left an iTunes review, we would greatly appreciate that. Bump us from that long held 70s number there into the 80s. That'd be awesome.
Who's going to be entry number 80?
Who is it? I don't know.
We'll do it.
I don't know. I feel like we should offer a prize, but come on, just be kind, yeah, that's all I got for business time. You got anything else?
Just what you watching? What you reading? Oh, what you listening to?
What are you listening to? Ray, that was lovely. Look at you. You've missed that. I have. It good little outlet. Good little creative outlet.
Yeah.
We've got a mutual Whatcha this week.
And we kind of
in the spirit of that mutual Whatcha, I feel like you should outro us with a whole different style of music there, different era. So be thinking about that.
I love these. I love these heads up that you get. They're so great and so lengthy.
You got about 3 to 5 minutes. So
discuss amongst yourself.
Back at our New Year's Eve party, we had a little conversation, and part of our questions for our party gang was, what's something you're looking forward to? And I personally threw WandaVision in the ring as the thing I was looking forward to. Someone recently was like, oh, now that WandaVision's over, there's nothing else for you this year. I was like, no, you misunderstood what I said. I just said, what is a thing someone is looking forward to? And so I was looking forward to WandaVision. It wasn't like that's going to be the sum total definition of my 2021. Nonetheless, let's talk about WandaVision.
Let's talk about WandaVision, shall we? So it's MCU's first entry, obviously, in TV series. Still kind of felt, to be candid, even though there was a weekly build-up, the narrative arc kind of felt very much like, I won't call it Marvel formula, because it was too out of the box to really fit that, particularly in the first half.
Sure.
But the overall narrative arc did feel like this is really kind of a 6-ish hour movie,
right,
so to speak. And so that, but in that regard, what I found most interesting about it is the ways in which, like, in many ways, week to week, the speculating, the theorizing, the wondering what this meant and that meant, it kind of recalled, and I think I even saw an article basically to this effect, that it kind of recalled the good old days of the original run of Lost, where like
Sure.
everybody in their world and it would be like, ooh, what does this mean? And who's going to show up? And they would latch on to literally every single line of dialogue to say, oh my gosh, this means something. And
I'm not referring to you here, but yes, I know someone in my orbit who was like, this is what that one line of dialogue means. I was like, I think you're reading too much into it. I think you might be. I could be wrong, but I think you might be.
And even I got caught up a little bit in some of the things like surrounding the engineer, what's the identity of the engineer and everything. You know, I got caught up in a lot of that. Now, I will say that for myself, from the episode where, and we will touch on spoilers a little bit. We don't have to dive whole hog into it, but from the episode, I believe it was like maybe 6 or 7, where we begin to see Wanda's flashbacks. I'll just say that, where we, kind of going back through. From that episode onward, I think I pretty quickly recalibrated to, oh, okay, this is what this show is about. Not necessarily all the bigger, grander, epic connecting dot scope that it was.
Right.
I still felt like there would maybe be a couple of surprise reveals that didn't happen, but I recalibrated pretty quickly after Wanda's flashbacks episode.
It's interesting. You and I have had conversations in IRL and on pod over the years about the tension of binge shows versus the week-to-week format. And I think the show is really fascinating as a lens through which to further have that conversation, because I think I kind of am glad it was week to week. I actually enjoyed the in the spirit of how I even started this, the something to look forward to at the end of the week. And I watched it with my kids. We would get up early on Friday. After a certain point, we started to do that. And so it just became this fun kind of conversation in the home. So from that standpoint, I really enjoyed it. There is a sense in which, did they inadvertently shoot themselves in the foot a little bit because of the sheer balloon inflation that happened of people's expectations? Because I'm with you. My summary statement on WandaVision is I actually really love what we got, even if at various points I wasn't sure what I was wanting out of it, if that makes sense. I really enjoy ultimately what it is. And once you sort of take that full picture into account, I think there's a lot of really lovely stuff in it. I do think you're not wrong. I mean, it plays very much in the traditional wheelhouse of superhero storytelling that goes back, to the early CW DC shows, like this season long big bad that's operating in the shadows. Now, what WandaVision does rather well, I would say, is tilting that format, those first 3 and 4 episodes, in what it does kind of in its structure and its design. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I think the performers are fantastic. Catherine Hahn is a friggin' gift. My gosh.
She's wonderful.
Amazing.
Really great stuff from Olsen as well. Like I thought she had the chance finally to really show what she's capable of as an actor and a performer. And I think I didn't feel like the MCU had really underserved her until I saw this story where she's able to play with all these different layers, that I thought was really, really pretty spectacular for her. I thought it was a really strong performance. And Paul Bettany as well is really great. Although he is in many ways doing a lot of the same kinds of things we've seen him capable of doing before. I think this was just really an opportunity for her to shine in a way that she hadn't been given the chance to before.
Have you had a chance to watch the behind the scenes special they did?
I haven't. I want to, but
very good.
As of this recording,
very good. Okay, as a brief little note, they spend a decent chunk of a portion of that special talking about making those first 2 episodes, and man, they went all out. The crew is in period dress. It's an actual live studio audience, so they put in chairs that are harkening back to that era. The lighting equipment is era specific. Like, they went all out.
That's cool. That's fun.
I encourage you to watch it, and anyone too, if you had a passing appreciation for the show, it'll really increase your affection for kind of just the production aspect of the entire enterprise.
No, that's really cool. Yeah. Well, cool. Yeah. So, WandaVision.
And as of us recording this, 2 days from now,
That's it.
Your boy's Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Where it's coming. It's coming. I know, which is, it's going to be such a drastic shift. I know, because,
Oh yeah,
the shows are clearly going to be about two very different things, very different tones, everything. But I am curious and excited to see what they drop on us next. So yeah, I'm
while we're tipping our hats here, let's not leave our fellow fandom out. I mean, the Snyder Cut is coming out.
The Snyder Cut is dropping down. The Snyder Cut is dropping down. I will, So I will say, this is not a second what you watch it, but I will say formally, we have repeatedly, listeners know, given decent chunks of shade towards particularly BVS DOJ, but
UE. Not UE.
But we've given decent chunks of shade towards that. I think I might have expressed.
Are you playing the spousal pronoun game right here? When you say we, do you mean me?
Well, I've joined you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. No,
I would have said we, but I'm worried when you say we, you really mean
no.
You.
But
okay.
I think I've said something to this end before, but in case I haven't, so formally, I will make a statement here about the upcoming Snyder Cut. I don't know if I'll like it or not, because a lot of the stories that have been told before have not quite been my cup of tea, my flavor of storytelling, just in general, that, to each their own. But I will say that I'm curious to see how this plays out. There is a large part of me that is glad the fans finally get something that they want. Zack Snyder, at least from, what I hear about his presence on set or his working with people, seems like he's a decent guy and seems like he's somebody people enjoy working with. And, this is something that his own personal tragedies and some of the critical sort of tension took him out of the running. They did, I think, in general, creatively speaking, there's this big part of my heart that has a lot of sympathy for him, because I can understand what it must have been like to be like, oh, well, now this Joss Whedon guy is taking over all of this stuff, and this is the theatrical cut. And that must have been a really dreadful thing for anybody with a creative spirit or heart to go through, whether or not their material is something that connects with us, regardless of that. I am glad, if for no other person than him and his devoted fans, that they get to have this moment, whatever it looks like. It might not be my cup of tea.
When they, I don't know if you remember this or paid attention to this during height of pandemic. There was some DC online event, and this is when a lot of, maybe even the announcement, that's when they announced it. I don't remember formally, but what I did see, I had a great swell of affection for my fellow fans because I know that feeling. Of watching all the Marvel news roll out and the energy and the excitement. And so I was really grateful that they got those, folks who are ardent fans of that universe got to have that as well. And right. I mean, maybe I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens. Maybe there's the fog cut.
The fog cut.
Say it really fast.
No. No, I won't. I shall not be doing that, sir. What I shall be doing instead is
what
you watch and read and listen and watching and reading and watching and reading. Dude, wait. What you watching? What you reading? What you watching and you reading, listening to? And what you watching, reading, listening to?
Wow, he's going. He's doing it.
What you watching, reading, listening to?
You never cease to impress, Lackey. You never.
What you watching, reading, listening to? I actually don't know that theme song very well.
I mean,
but
there's a lot. You're operating on a lot of levels there.
And it's
like you were conversing with me, but you weren't really, because you were thinking about all this. You were just like indulging. Yeah.
But it's like I did. Those weren't the exact shows that they used in WandaVision, but I tried to use the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s. We understood. Yeah. So there you go. But anyway, that was that. So,
all right.
Here we are. So we have something pretty exciting to talk about today. You've already seen the title of the episode. And so should we start by, sharing what the individual listener who
Let's do
submitted
it.
this
It's
did.
I mean, we had a Canadian on the show last week. Let's sort of have another Canadian on the show this week.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, so what is kind of cool about this is obviously Nathan and I are here. We reached out to the submitter of this particular piece, and
It was Justin Trudeau.
Who knew he was a fan? Like, it was the most random thing. Hey guys, I like your show. Oh my gosh! So we were watching. No. We were watching there's a TV show that's Celebrity Wheel of Fortune. They do I guess celebrity versions of everything now, where the celebrities come on and they play for charity, right? Well, there was in Wheel of Fortune, the puzzle itself, the answer was podcast host, right?
Okay.
And so then they started talking for 30 seconds about oh yeah, podcasts, blah blah blah, and then Chrissy Metz from This Is Us was one of the guests on it, and I think they asked her did she enjoy podcasts or something, and then my son busts out he was like, what if her favorite podcast is The Fear of God? And I was like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
Good on your son for even thinking that. So
I know. I was like, oh, that's
very
so sweet.
pleasant.
So yes, we reached out to our devoted Canadian listener, Brent Westerink, and asked him if he would be kind enough to grace us with an actual recording of his thoughts on our upcoming piece. And so Brent was kind enough to share it with us, and we will share it with you right here, right now. Take it away, Brent.
So when asked the question, what scares me? Hands down, the answer to that question is Chucky, the serial killer doll from the Child's Play franchise. The whole concept of a children's toy, something that's meant to be innocent, killing you is a terrifying concept. From around the time I was in 5th grade to my later teen years, I was actually so afraid of Chucky that I would purposefully avoid walking down the horror aisle of the video store. Even though I enjoyed watching horror films, I was just too scared to see even a picture of Chucky in any capacity. It was really bad, though. There was one time my brother actually cut a picture of Chucky out of a newspaper and chased me around the house with it. I actually ended up locking myself in the bathroom, and I refused to come out until he tore it up and flushed it down the toilet. I was that terrified. Anyways, I did end up watching the movie eventually, and I've seen all the sequels as well. But I think one thing that's really stuck with me about that whole concept is some of the backstory to how Don Mancini came up with the concept. So the whole idea of him responding to targeted advertisements and marketing to children in the 80s was something that he wanted to speak to and sort of speak to in a satirical way. But again, that whole idea of a young boy being the target of the film also creeps me out. I mean, being a dad myself, the idea of bringing something evil home to my son is a terrifying and frightening idea. Anyways, I could talk for days about this film. I just wanted to throw it out there as one for you guys to possibly cover, and you chose to do it. So anyways, I'm really looking forward to hearing the episode and hearing about what themes and ideas the two of you are able to bring up in the conversation. Anyways, thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you, Brent. What a fun story.
Thank you very, very much.
Reed, is it weird to you that we hadn't covered this yet?
There's a few that, as I was thinking about, because obviously we do this for 4 years now, but we've had one thing that I don't know that other series do is we have certain thematic considerations that sometimes lead us to content that otherwise might have been a bit outside the box. So, we've done several things. I wouldn't say it's necessarily weird, but there are a handful of pieces, some of which will be included in this series, some of which still linger because nobody mentioned them, that make me feel like, okay, yeah, it's getting close to time. If you're a horror-themed podcast at all, you probably shouldn't go 5-6 years without covering X, or without having a discussion about, Y or whatever. So this is definitely one that I thought, okay, I know we'll eventually get to it in some fashion. So I was really pleased when Brent brought it up and gave us the chance to talk about it. But what's interesting about that is that, so I was actually pretty late in the game to coming to the franchise. Before I tell my little piece of it, was this your first time seeing this film and or any of the Chucky films?
Yes.
Okay.
Of course I'm familiar with it.
Sure.
And in fact, my wife, I actually invited her. I was like, hey, you want to watch Child's Play? She's like, no, because it is, she would be the one, like Brent, submitting this as her What Scares Us, because she has memories of either her older sibling or somehow being shown this as like 5 or 6 years old,
Ooh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Okay,
And definitely has harrowing memories of that.
So what's perhaps slightly ironic, given how many films I watched at a young age, this is a film I didn't see for the first time until I was in my 20s. And so long after the franchise had multiple sequels, I think I didn't see the first one until after something ridiculous like Seed of Chucky had come out, which is like part 5 in this series.
I was going to say, I don't know how many there are. So
there's
when
7...
you say something ridiculous, I mean, yes, the title Seed of Chucky is pretty ridiculous, but I don't know what you mean in terms of the sequence.
So there've been 7 entries in the main franchise, and then there's been the 2019 remake. Did
you watch that one?
I did, and I liked it quite a bit. I think pound for pound, this original entry is certainly a scarier film, and I think in general a more interesting film. But I did very much like the remake.
Essentially the same plot.
It not quite, because a big major element of this, as listeners who've watched this will know, is the villain of the piece, Charles Lee Ray, transplants his soul into the body of Chucky.
The old one.
Of the old one. In the remake, it is an AI malfunction. There's an inhibitor because it's a learning computer processor that inhabits these good guy dolls. So in the remake, one of the it's been a while since I've seen it, but I watched it like probably in proximity to its coming out. And if memory serves, there was a disgruntled employee who like disengaged the inhibitors of one of those things, and it sent the doll on a learning computer as like he buddies up with the child who he's been gifted to, and then when that child is frustrated with an adult, the doll takes it upon themselves to punish said adult for frustrations, and then things get out of control from there. Voiced by Mark Hamill in that.
Really?
Yeah, in that remake. Which
I mean, I know it's got Aubrey Plaza and Brian Tyree Henry. It's good cast.
Yeah. And it is it's very strong. Like honestly, like if you're a fan of the Chucky stuff, it's its own unique little bubble, but it's very strong as a film, and I liked it a lot.
Can I throw in here, in doing some trivial bits reading, what you just described of the plot sounds a little closer to the initial pitch for the film.
That's right.
For the original film.
Right. The first draft, the idea was there were 2 things that I do find very interesting that eventually didn't make it to the film that were in early drafts. The first is that, as you just alluded to, Chucky's sort of violence was aimed towards people who disappointed or hurt Andy.
Right.
And that's what it was aimed at, and then just got out of control. So that element was in the original, and of course has now become part of the remake. The other element that I thought was fascinating is that I heard in early drafts, or I read, I should say, that they played in early drafts around a lot with whether or not there was really sort of a sentience to Chucky, or if it was just Andy acting these things out and blaming it on Chucky, like a psychological break.
I mean, watching it, 35 plus years after its release, there's no way to separate yourself from that. But I mean, I could see a world where if you had seen no marketing for it, they could have played that out and teased that out, and that's kind of there to see if you
absolutely
divorce it from pop culture. Which
right. And so I think it's pretty interesting. The first 3 entries. So I said there's 7. I watched the first one for the first time in my 20s, and not worth lingering a lot on, but it is one of a handful of horror tent poles that the first time I saw it, I didn't really like it very much. I thought it was okay. Didn't really connect to it. And now I'm sitting in a place where I appreciate and actively enjoy it significantly more, to where I actively enjoy this series and this film. But I didn't revisit like the sequels until, gosh, maybe even like a year or two ago, where I finally was just like, you know what? I've never seen the Child's Play sequels. I think they came on one Halloween on like AMC or something, all in a run.
Sure.
And I was like, let me watch them. And you know, they weren't the original versions because AMC edits them down. But I was like, let me just see what they've got going on. What's kind of cool about it is parts 1, 2, and 3 are directly like horror, kind of play around with some comical stuff because of the nature of Chucky as a character. But then with Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky, they wholeheartedly just embrace horror comedy satire, where they're just like, we're silly, we're goofy, this is just absurd and ridiculous. What's interesting to me is that then with part 6, which I believe is called Curse of Chucky, they went all the way around again. I would argue that the scariest the pure fright level, the scariest entry in the franchise is part 6. It's a genuinely scary film. And they go back to basics. They take away a lot of the, and it is a continuing story. So it's all of parts 1 through 5 happened, but just in the narrative of part 6, they go back to bare bones, and it's really effective to that degree. Part 7 is also pretty good to that end. So yeah, it's a franchise I appreciate. But yeah, I know 7 entries. So I like that quite a bit. I would encourage, if people connected to this one and liked it, that it's worth seeking out some of the sequels. Just know that like Bride of Chucky and Seed of Chucky intentionally get kind of silly. So if that's not your cup of tea, just kind of be ready for that. One thing that on a personal note that I thought was worth mentioning. So the Chucky design was inspired by the Hasbro line of My Buddy dolls.
Sure.
I had a My Buddy doll.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. And so I have a strong memory, never having seen Child's Play when I was younger. I have a pretty strong memory of like being gifted the My Buddy doll, and I thought it was interesting that like the My Buddy doll was very, very popular,
right?
And then Child's Play comes out and pretty much kills the line.
Well, the trivia on IMDb specifically says My Buddy never recovered from the release of Child's Play.
The sales of it did,
because remember they had Kid Sister as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, for little girls.
My buddy,
wherever I go.
He's gonna go, my buddy. My buddy, my lackey and me.
You know it too. Did you actually have one, or do you just know the song?
Nope. I did not have a My Buddy. I had Pound Puppies.
Oh, Pound Puppies. Pound Puppies, unlike the My Buddy doll, Pound Puppies are still around. My son owns like 5. Yeah.
Really?
Pound Puppies. Yeah, Pound Puppies are still around. So, yeah, they still make them. Still come in those little carrying cases. Still have a little certificate that comes with
My mom tells the story of me walking around a grocery store with my Pound Puppy singing Billie Jean.
Wow, that's delightful.
But no, I mean that happened like a year ago with the new Pound Puppies.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. No, as a child.
I know how you like that. So I have just a couple more trivial bits before we dive into some more specifics. But I couldn't help but notice, and this I don't know why this stood out to me, but that the child's name is Andy, and of course Andy has a doll that comes to life, and so I couldn't help but notice the Toy Story connection, because I was like, oh yeah, okay. Because, and this is funny, I don't know if people remember this, when the remake was happening, it was released the exact same day as Toy Story 4, and initial marketing didn't do this, but once it was firmed up that it was going to be released the same day as Toy Story 4, they did limited marketing that is pretty widely available. You could Google it and you could still see the posters. That I don't know how to take this for some people. I thought it was clever and a little fun, but I know some people, even some people like close to me, who were pretty upset and offended by it. That what they did was they took, you have the Toy Story 4 imagery of like Woody, like with a little tip of the hat in like this, muted background. Well, Child's Play posters have images of him coming along and butchering the Toy Story characters. Like he's like, it's got an image of Woody's arm like splayed out with like stuffing pouring out of it and some blood, and then there was an image where he has apparently blasted the top half of Buzz off with Buzz's own blaster. And then the other one that stands out is the one with Slinky Dog, where he's holding up half of Slinky Dog over a campfire. And it's like, I mean, like I said, it's pretty, I can understand why people would say howdy. Ooh. But I found it maybe because I'm naive, I found it to be playful marketing that was on brand for the
Sure.
particular piece.
Yeah.
I can understand somebody who, especially if they had a young child or something who didn't understand why there's suddenly this picture of Buzz with half his body gone. But I thought it was pretty clever on brand marketing myself. But understand why people would, maybe not like that. Last trivial bit that I have, just because I want to sing his praises for doing something like this, is so Chris Sarandon at the time was the biggest star of the film. He'd already done Princess Bride. He'd already done Fright Night, which was directed by the same person, and he's one of the major stars in that. And he got top billing because he's the biggest star. I don't know who he spoke to, but whoever it was that he spoke to, he specifically asked that Catherine Hicks be given top billing because he said she's the star of this film. She carries the film. And I thought that was noteworthy because it was probably quite rare for,
Sure.
he was more popular, was going to receive top billing, and as the trivia information would have it, specifically asked for them to give top billing to Catherine Hicks.
And when
which I thought
she
was cool.
heard that, she was like, humpeting.
Which is like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah.
No. So clearly, okay, I've talked a ton. I just want to know, in general, your thoughts, reactions. I've expressed a little bit of sort of my history with not being really on board and then coming around on it. What were your sort of first impressions, general assessments? Like, what'd you think about this film? How'd you respond to it?
It's always interesting when you got into this one in your 20s. Now at 41, I'm watching this kind of considered a classic for the first time. It's always hard to know, okay, well, what am I getting here?
Sure,
and what about it was meaningful at the time, and is that thing still resonant now? And I will say I totally understand the Brent Westerinks and the My Wifes of the world, of which there's only one, by the way. For whom, you see a movie like this at a formative age, it's going to be pretty scarring, but I kind of found it entertaining in a way that I was like, oh, that was, I think fun's an okay word in this context, but I was impressed with, you just never know. You never know in 2021 how a film from 1988 with a talking doll is going to hold up, and
right,
because think about it, like your low budget today VFX could look pretty bad 30 years from now. So yes. I'm not saying this movie was low budget, but when I go in not knowing what I'm going to get, you're thinking, okay, talking doll, how well is that going to look or translate, or what level of budget did this have compared to its peers in 1988? And I mean, I thought Chucky was really well rendered. I was kind of like, dang, that's pretty good.
Yeah. The effects hold up really well.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know that, bad voodoo is a great look, but
if there's a moment that, well, A, that I appreciated is absolutely nowhere to be found in the remake, but B, that doesn't age well in any capacity. It's that element, and specifically that scene is really like, if you're going to point a finger to like, do
you mean when the character shows up later on, or the fact that he used, okay.
Yeah, well, both. I mean,
yes, I agree. It's inclusion at all. And it's so funny. And I know, listener, this is a very woke, progressive 2021 hot take. I get it, on a movie that's almost 40 years old, but I love just the image of like a writer's room on this and being like, okay, so we've got the premise we want, but how do we make it happen? Voodoo. That's not going to be perceived as anything, kind of culturally insensitive or racially charged whatsoever. That'll get it. We got it. Yeah. Voodoo. So, that aside, I don't know. It was entertaining. I think the kid actor is actually pretty good, all things considered. Yeah. I'll phrase it this way. He's annoying in the way he should be, but he's also pretty good on film, on camera.
The scene where he's crying in fear inside the little institution because he has seen that Chucky is like climbing the stairs and after him, and he's having this moment where he's really just sort of breaking down is really effective. Like,
are you
it's
talking about the
very
scene
believable.
where he kind of is punching Chucky?
Oh no, although that scene is wonderful. No, I mean when he's been as a result of that scene. So the scene you're referring to, which I think is going to come up later in our conversation, is the scene where he's trying in the presence of adults to get Chucky to speak, and he's like gets really frustrated, starts hitting the doll and everything. That scene's really effective. What I was referring to is, as a result of that scene, they took him to an institution to spend a few days under observation, and then while in that institution, he looks out the window and sees that Chucky is like, climbing the stairs and coming after him.
That's a creepy scene.
And he has this, and it's really, it's effective in a lot of ways because, praise to the child actor, because he begins to cry and fall apart because and that can kind of bleed into a couple of things because he said he's coming to kill me, which is
that was a very heartbreaking performance in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, as a parent, I had a very visceral emotional response.
Absolutely, I did too. Yeah, I did too.
I will say, so I'm gonna offer this rather superficial story as just a cursory jumping into things here. So, I had a really humorous response to my own actions here. I was writing the note. I mean, if you're gonna buy some janky ass banged up toy from a back alley peddler, you kind of may be set up for failure. And I had to chuckle because Reed. So in this movie, the good guy dolls, they're super costly. I don't remember exactly if they said they're 100. Yeah.
Yeah. They're $100. Yeah.
And literally the mom's coworker is like, I saw this bum in the back alley. He had what you're looking for, and literally that's the setup. And she goes and pays dollars to this bum guy with super bad prosthetic teeth and an actual banged up box for this toy.
Oh yeah, it's like opened. Yeah.
So you'll love this. I had to chuckle because in my mind I'm judging this mom. Good night, lady. What are you thinking? Then I had to remember. Oh snap! I haven't done anything quite that extremely weird, but a few years ago.
Oh no!
When I was looking for the Force Awakens Lego Millennium Falcon.
Oh no!
I sort of like Facebook Marketplace. There was this app. What was it called? Garage Sale. That was it. Garage Sale. I don't even know if it exists anymore. I don't use it anymore. But it was they took the money. It was like a quote unquote more bona fide Craigslist. So like it linked to your social media account, so you knew, this is Reed Lackey, based on the fact that I can go look at his profile. So.
That's creepy.
I mean, that's social media. But I was on the hunt. I wanted this Millennium Falcon Lego, and that beget a whole slew of purchases since then. But nonetheless, on Garage Sale, this lady was selling this particular thing. Now that particular set, I think, retailed for $100. This is where this story.
Oh no!
Humorously resonant. It's either 100. I'm pretty sure it was 100, and I think she had listed it for like 75, and I was just like, "Hey, $50." She's like, "Okay." So now I know you have at least a brain for Lego, and those things are expensive. Like especially if you get the bigger sets or whatever, those are very
Premium
expensive.
sets.
They never go on sale.
Yeah.
Well, sure enough, Reed, I drive 30 minutes to a Target because this lady is like, okay, meet me at this Target in the parking lot. This is a true story. This actually did this.
Oh my gosh.
And I show up at the Target with my $50. It was broad daylight. Okay. It wasn't nighttime. She didn't have janky teeth. And I bought this Lego set. And in my mind, I'm like, somebody stole this. There is no way you have this and are and are selling it at literally half of MSRP.
Yeah, of course.
In a parking lot at Target. But you know what? I didn't ask questions. I
You just brought it home. Yeah,
I did. And it's assembled on my shelf right now.
And what you don't realize is that it flies over your bed at night because it possesses the soul.
The little porg. Yeah, the little porg is actually imbued. But because it's so small, it doesn't impact me as much as Chucky would.
Sure,
you know,
of course.
like this porg in the dead of night, there's like Paranormal Activity. There's an image of a porg like banging on my head, a tiny little Lego porg. So anyway, I can't really judge Andy's mom in this movie because I was like, dadgummit.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
in fact, I bought it for me. So it wasn't even like her who bought it for a kid. And I was like,
she's trying to be benevolent to her child because she cannot stand
I was just
the
like,
look on his face.
I like a deal.
Yeah.
Anyway,
oh my gosh. So maybe that's a good entry point into this whole thing. Like, I think in general, it's the relationship between the mom and child in this film is endearing. It's very endearing. I mean, the very first thing we see is, bless his poor little heart, he is trying to cook breakfast for his mom on his birthday. And that burnt toast with that glob of
shovels
butter.
of sugar in the cereal. He's sloshing it all down the hall. I was like,
And it's like, but it's you know, it's really sweet. And that undercuts some of what would have sat a little wrong with me. I shouldn't say wrong, but it would have sat a little sour with me, where he opens up the clothes and every child his age who opens up clothes would have that exact reaction. Like, oh, yeah, okay, great. Thanks for the huge box. Yeah. Thanks for the huge box with pants in it. I really appreciate that, you know. But then when he opens up the smaller toy, there's this moment that I think is very real, where he looks and is like, I want a good guy doll to go with this. Like, he's got the toy set, and I feel for the mom. She's a single mom because his dad, her husband, has died. The film doesn't tell us how or what the circumstances are. In fact, the only clue we have to it, I had read that there were other scenes which better established what had happened to his father. But the only clue we have in the film that remains is a line where Andy says to his mom, that Chucky claims to have been sent by heaven from their daddy.
Yeah.
Or like from heaven by their daddy, you know, so which is pretty jacked up. But you know, so this relationship, it's like you can feel the necessary weight, to your point about why would she go to janky teeth homeless guy and buy this good guy doll, is because, my God, she's being forced to work shifts by an absolute D-bag of a boss. Smack, like, who is like, what in the world? Smack that guy upside the head. Do you like this job? No, as a matter of fact, like, you do this crap to me and make me work a double shift that I wasn't planning on my son's birthday. But regardless of that, so you really do. I think the film does a better job than we might initially give it credit for of establishing the gravity behind the relationship in which they navigate. So there's that piece of it. And I think that adds more emotional weight when things start to, like, you mentioned earlier that you had a visceral reaction to when the child is, like, you know, falling apart, crying, heartbreaking. I also found myself, and maybe this is why, gosh, this is coming to me like in real time. I first saw this movie in my 20s when I was not a parent. And I wonder, it is purely a curiosity, I wonder if some of why I respond a bit more positively and a bit more strongly, specifically to this film, not necessarily the franchise as a whole, though I do like it, but I wonder if some of that is baked into my reaction to Karen and Andy's relationship, which I do think the film presents very well.
Which is funny, because on the whole, I absolutely agree with you. They have a lovely dynamic. But I actually wrote this down now, having no idea you were going to prop that up as the architecture you see there.
Sure, yeah.
Which I think is there. But dude, she gives up real easy when the voice from the other room is like, I'm from County General and I've seen enough, and I think Andy should stay with us a few days. And literally the next scene, she's back at home like, dang, she didn't put up a fight at all. Like, wow. I mean, I get it. I'm a parent of 3. I need a break sometimes. I don't know that I would have relented quite so easily, but nonetheless, I do.
But I thought, so agreed. Don't disagree. Counter that with the scene when she goes home in the privacy of her own home and starts shaking Chucky and demands that he speak. You know, like
yeah.
That's a moment that I think, again, I agree with the observation you just made. I think
honestly, it's more an editing problem. I'm being jokey.
It could be.
I think it's an editing issue. And I don't know if you saw this. Did you see in your research that there's like initial cuts were like 3 hours long?
I did.
And that there's
insane.
a scene of Chris Sarandon in a dress in the first run when he's tracking down Charles Lee Ray. Yeah.
Yes.
And that apparently, I didn't know this because I didn't know to look for it. When you first see him on screen, he's tossing an article of clothing, and it's
the dress away.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, point being, I'm being jokey about the relationship. I do think there's a world where it's just wonky editing in that scene.
Yeah, that's possible.
Like a cut that's a little odd.
And apparently on that deleted scenes, apparently they have tried with subsequent like special edition releases and stuff to dig up these deleted scenes. But when Tom Holland had deleted them,
Spider-Man?
Right. When he had gotten rid of them from his cut, he basically like just completely destroyed them. He was like, "Yep, we don't need that. We're just going to go away." So they're not salvageable or not found or something.
Wow. He
shot them, edited it, everything, but then when he cut them, they're just completely gone. But no, I really like that aspect of the film. I think we've already mentioned it, and it's not worth too much of our time. But I do think because it is so fundamental to the premise, I think the underlying sort of his calling upon a voodoo ritual to inhabit the body of this doll, that, as we've already said, does not age well. But I myself kind of bypass it as a relic of its time.
Sure. Yeah.
Would hang a lantern on how arcane and how problematic it is as a current story point. But for myself, I'm just like, okay, well, let's bypass that for a moment. It's absurd and it's not cool, but there's a lot of other stuff in it that I think is really interesting. Most of what I have written down as superficial elements are ironically in scares. Like, I like the effects, but I have quite a few scares written down.
I can dig on that. Before you get there.
Yeah.
I didn't have this written down as a question, but I'm trying to figure out how to frame it as one.
Oh, okay. Sure.
So, yeah, I can't figure out. I want to ask you, because you and I developed a friendship in a season of time when you did some acting. We both have degrees in theater. And what I'm trying to figure out how to ask, but I can't conjure a specific example for myself, is when as an actor you ever had to do something really weird. So for instance, what inspires this question or this line of thinking, whether it materializes into a question or not, my guy Chris Sarandon, like, how does he feel performing with a knife trying to stab him in the car? That scene, I was like, I feel like there's some Benny Hill music that should be playing right here over this scene, because he is like elevating himself up off the car seat. He's dodging. He's trying not to get stabbed in the jump with this knife, in the back with this knife, and just all around. It's just,
everywhere.
It is high comedy and zany. And I'm like,
it's very zany.
This poor actor.
Oh,
everybody needs a paycheck. And Child's Play ultimately is a decent film, but I'm sure filming this scene, he was like, I did not go to school for this.
What's interesting is I actually wrote that down as a scare because of how, not because I think it, because I agree with you, it's just a utterly wacky scene, but because of how much I squirm myself watching it, because I'm just like, oh my god, like
shift.
Yeah,
he's trying to drive. That's some serious multitasking.
No kidding. Oh my gosh, get thicker seats, man, because like that's like it goes very, very
or thicker skin.
Oh yeah, that might work. No, I agree. One thing that
we can get in the scare. What? I'm sorry.
No. Just a couple of things that I'll mention. One thing that I'll mention is it is, for all of the wonderful, effective ways that Chucky as a special effect exists in this film, and it is impressive, all these years later, that it still holds up as well as it does. One of the genuinely most chilling moments in the film to me is when Andy has been sent to bed and is brushing his teeth, and then suddenly the 9 o'clock news comes back on, and Aunt Maggie looks over and the Chucky doll is just sitting there lounging, watching the 9 o'clock. That's really unnerving. Like, that's super unnerving. And the reason that's unnerving is because that's not complete. How should I put it? It is possible that through glitches in technology, a thing like that might happen purely by coincidental accident. You know, like a device turns on or something, and there's a toy nearby it. You know, and there's something really chilling about, like, oh man, Chucky's just sitting there lounging.
It's like when I wake
the 9
up
o'clock news
tomorrow morning, there's a little Lego Porg laying against the bed.
And it's just like,
ah.
I'm like, who put this here? Who messing with? Who messing with
my
me?
wife? I'm like, you
Did
play
you
with
do this? And she looks and she's like, "Is that the one you bought from the janky teeth old lady in the parking lot of the Target?"
I told you it was cursed.
I told you shouldn't buy no Millennium Falcon for $50. It was stolen and possessed by some.
You knew it was stolen, Nathan. You knew it.
You did it anyway. Just put it in the car and drive away.
Yeah.
So yeah, that moment genuinely is kind of creepy. What did you have on your list,
bro? On my scares list, is that where we're at?
Well, I mean, whatever.
You know,
yeah.
well, I'm on my scares now, and let me tell you.
Oh boy,
I was more impressed with the special effects on Chucky, but that giant mascot, good guy Chucky in that commercial,
yes,
that ain't right.
That ain't right.
That ain't right. I was like, turn this off. I mean,
who wants this?
Those dumb kids. Kids are so dumb.
I want a giant scary beast in my house.
No, I did multiple times be like, that is a large doll. And Andy's carrying around, like, I would not be comfortable with that in my house.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. No,
it like teeters. It's no wonder my buddy failed after this film, but it's like the design, it just teeters on the line between demented cutesy and just demonic. Like, there's no neutral. There's no benign version of that Chucky design. It's like cutely demented or spawn of hell. You know?
Yeah.
Just
yes.
no middle ground there. I will say this. Maggie had a hell of a death scene. My word.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, she gets that hammer to the dome. And then she like does a Three Stooges, whoop, 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 you know, backwards, and then out the 6th floor window with a slow motion fall.
Oh yeah,
on top of a car like that. I wanted like a trio of passersby to hold up signs with their numbers 10. On it. Like 10. Like, that was impressive.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's pretty crazy, and happens early in the film.
It does.
Like, that's one thing, is like we start getting kills like before it's even 20 minutes into the movie, which is kind of crazy. Because normally you would take the big buildup would be like, oh, you get your big monster reveal, and then, you know, I don't know. It felt early in the film, but anyway, still, it was really impressive.
When you mess around with Chucky, he messes back. You turn off the news.
Yeah,
there's a worrisome metaphor there.
He don't like that. So I really it's one of my favorite moments in the movie is the entire scripting, production, suspense, tension building, everything. She shakes him. She's like, speak, you know, speak to me, whatever. And then she takes the box and the batteries fall out. It's wonderful. I saw it coming a mile away. The batteries fall out. The music begins to heighten. And then when she picks the doll up, knowing it has no batteries in it, and then the head spins around and, you know, the I'm Chucky, want to play, like, that is a really suspenseful moment.
Listeners, funny story. What did I text you? I don't want to go look it up.
I forget.
I hadn't quoted anything yet. So I'm watching Child's Play for the first time 2 nights ago.
Oh, I know what you texted me.
What?
It was a line from the movie we may not want to quote.
Was it
it's she deserved to.
Yeah. It's when Andy is speaking on behalf of Chucky to Mom.
Yes.
And he calls Aunt Maggie a wordy dird.
Yes.
And So I text that to Reed. Man, Chucky's got a potty mouth, or Andy's got a potty mouth. So then minutes later, I'm watching the movie, and it's, if you can envision these things happening simultaneously, because that is effectively what happened. My phone buzzes. It's Reed. I'm Reed seeing me hold up my phone on the camera on the. I go to look at my phone while at the same time on TV, Chucky is turning his head. What's the line you just quoted?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Want to play? Yeah.
Reed sends the meme of that literally at the same time
At
the
the
movie
moment.
is doing it. I was like, I dropped my phone. I was like, no more.
That ain't right. Turn it off.
That
Turn
ain't
it off.
right. Reed, get out of my house. Hey, do you feel like, I don't want to name the reference. I want to see if you caught it.
Oh,
I feel like there's a particular horror movie that gets a couple of heavy winks by this film.
Really?
And I didn't read it anywhere, but maybe I'm just that good these days.
Maybe you are that good, and maybe
references.
I'm not. Maybe we've switched roles in terms of the horror expert.
Well, there's two particular elements, visual elements in this film. The first one happened, I was like, interesting. That kind of works. And then later on, there's a different, what I think is a reference. I was like, that must be what they're alluding to. I feel like there's some heavy Shining references in this. One is the Chucky cam, which is reminiscent of Danny's go-kart cam.
Yes, right.
Or Hot Wheels cam. And then late in the film, when mom is against the door, there's a very knife through the door.
Yes, that has to be
Torrance.
Yes, that
homage.
absolutely. Yeah, I can't imagine that wouldn't be a call out to The Shining. No, I think you're absolutely.
So why
right.
did you fail, Reed? We need to pause here. What?
Because I didn't know what you were about to reference.
No.
So I just.
How did you miss those?
Well.
Like
So now the episode has taken a sour turn.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know. We hold a lot of things in our head for these recording nights, and I didn't have that written down, so I don't know. So, but anyway, no. So the last thing that I just wanted to mention is we've already sung the praises of the effects and everything, but burnt up Chucky with this whole and it's really creepy when he's like stalking towards Andy, and that is a really, really effective kind of fright scene in general, which for a film, again, this is 88, I want to say.
Yeah.
And for a film that is that, obviously dated, I was surprised at how genuinely effective the scares kind of hold up. I do still think this is genuinely a very creepy film.
I mean,
for a first
I got to hand it to a movie when I'm thinking, how did they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And they blended some things in. It's obvious in a couple of shots, not so obvious in others, that Chucky has a variety of different animatronic iterations, but then there are also iterations where it's a living person, maybe a child or a little person actor that is actually like, performing the scene. And they blend it really effectively. I
do like the comedy version of this, where how at the end Chris Sarandon, of course, doesn't believe the mom, or the mom doesn't believe Andy. Then Chris Sarandon doesn't believe the mom, and then the partner doesn't believe Chris Sarandon. Right. I just love the thought of a final scene of this that's just singular individuals continually showing up to the crime scene and Chucky attacking them and them just getting loose and be like, well, now who's gonna believe me? And then someone else shows. It's just the room keeps filling up. That's
either your SNL bit or it's like the Benny Hill music. You're just like, one more person walks in. Oh, Reverend Bob. What? I don't believe you.
Now who's gonna believe me?
It's like grandma with the cookies. Hey, brought the cookie. I don't believe you. And then just one after
another. Who doesn't believe is Andy and his mom live on the 6th floor of this apartment, and that lady shoots a gun into the floor like 3 times. Somebody below is not believing because they dead. There's a whole new crime scene below them.
It's like I can visualize a series of short films. It's like the victims that didn't get highlighted in horror movies. Oh my gosh.
Innocent bystanders. Not your
What in the
story.
world? No, that's what it's called. It's called This Is Not Your Story.
It's somebody doing their laundry in their apartment in that complex, and Chucky just walks by and they're like, what the hell?
I just see, and then he comes home and he tells his wife, "You'll never believe what I just saw." And she's like, "You're right.
I don't believe you.
I don't believe you."
Then she goes upstairs into the room. By the end of the movie, it's the whole building.
They're all just like, "What happened?"
I don't believe it.
Oh my. It's awesome. This is not your story. Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness.
Lord,
we need
that's
to
funny.
To the typewriter. That's
To the typewriter.
The Fog
Man, that's
anthology series
funny.
of
Oh
just
my God.
bystanders to horror films.
Man, that's funny.
Mm.
So okay. So I had something that I wanted to mention. So it is worth noting.
I don't believe you.
It is worth noting that for a film that I think just kind of works in general on a number of different, more superficial levels, Don Mancini, the writer, apparently was actually trying to create a metaphor out of Chucky for the notion of, and this is not the subject of the question that I'm about to ask, but it did bring some interesting things up in my mind. Presumably he was actually scratching at a metaphor of the way that like direct market commercialization, well, it's not direct market, that's a different thing, but it's like commercialization, sort of compelling children to bring things into their home. And what you're doing is, the marketing, the pervasive advertisement. Simpsons has a joke in an early episode of Simpsons where the commercial is for a video game called Bone Storm. And Bart and Lisa are sitting there watching it, and the actual line in The Simpsons, the commercial says, "So go tell your parents, buy me Bone Storm or go to hell." And so Bart walks in, and is like, "Buy me Bone Storm or go to hell." To which Homer replies, "Young man, in this house we use a little word called please," which I think is very funny. But it's it's this notion of you're compelling the kids to like beg. There's that moment where this poor struggling mom like gets the good guy tool set for her son, right? And he's like, "I want a good guy doll to go with it." Of course he does. Of course the child wants a good guy doll to go with it because he's just watched, Beast Mascot on this thing. He's just, he's watched these he's watched these pervasive ads. And so the writer was really sort of scratching at that, metaphorically speaking. But then what really begins to connect in my mind, and then I have a kind of a question that's associated with it, but what really begins to connect in my mind is you have this thing that has compelled Andy to beg to receive this toy, right? So his mom went to somewhat dubious lengths to try to acquire this toy.
No, it's good. It's justifiable.
Yeah,
Totally.
sure. Yeah, totally justifiable. But anyway, she kind of backdoored getting this good guy doll, brings it home. But then the child is the one, and I find this really interesting. Andy's the one who notices that, and we were joking for the past like 3 minutes about like I don't believe you, but he's the one who sees there's flour on the bottom of Chucky's feet. Mm-hmm. And he runs and he tells them, "Hey, it was Chucky on the counter." He's the one who says, like, his name is Charles Lee Ray. He's telling me about this. He's the one who is continually like, "Yes, I'm telling you, this doll is alive and it is transacting certain things," right? And then that scene that we referenced earlier, where he's under observation in the police station, and he is in what I find to be a really compelling moment narratively. He is arguing with this inanimate object, saying like, "Speak, Chucky," and then he's like, he's doing it on purpose, and he's saying some really haunting things. Like the language the child is using is, he said if I told anybody about him, he would kill me. Mm-hmm. And then even when he's, because horror movies do this regularly, and we've called it out on the show before, where people express a deadly threat to an authority figure, and they are completely dismissed because what they're saying is somewhat preposterous. Kids in, teenage slasher flicks, and they're just like, oh my God, Freddy's coming after me in my dreams. Like, you need sleep pills, like it's really that kind of tension.
Drugs, that will solve it.
But the question that I had is, I was like, man, what? And this is a bit geared towards like Andy's age and everything, but we talked about the heartbreaking nature of that scene where he's falling apart, crying, and he's like, he's coming to kill me, and nobody's listening to him. Nobody. And he's even saying, when the doctor's trying to give him a syringe to put him to sleep, he said, he's going to kill you too. Like, this is all bad.
Right.
And so my question is, like, what is it going to take for us to believe the generation behind us about the threats that are going to just utterly devastate us? Like, the things they're... Yeah, because I think there's this real tension that exists where people who are of an older generation, we kind of cross a bridge right now in our middle age years, that there's a tendency for an older generation of people to really be profoundly disbelieving of younger generations behind them when they identify threats. I'm not talking about, because I want to be really specific, I value and cherish the wisdom of people who have years of experience to impart. I tremendously value that. And I think we as a society should value that. What I'm talking about is the utter dismissal of sort of, I guess, what you could call the old guard. I don't know if that's the most appropriate sort of designation for it, but the dismissal of the old guard to, rambunctious youngsters who are trying to say up like, hey, this is a dangerous thing. This is something that needs to be attended to. And the way there can kind of be this superiority to try to say, like, this is lunacy. This is crazy. The mom experiences it, but then Chucky comes alive and actually like comes at her. So she tries naturally to convince the authority figure. And it just begins to drive me a little nuts, even though this is a fantasy horror film. It begins to drive me a little nuts that nobody is like, okay, what evidence do you have? Or like, why do you feel this way? Why do you think this way? They just immediately jump to dismissal and craziness. And it made me wonder, like, what will it take for us to start listening and believing the generations coming behind us who may be closer to awareness of the threat than we perhaps are because of our jadedness or because of our, stuck in our old ways or whatever it is. So anyway, I don't know if my question makes sense, but
sure. Yeah, it does. I'll answer your question with a question, and that's, have you seen Ted Lasso? And I'm actually being funny, but I've been rewatching Ted Lasso when I exercise lately, and it's coming to mind as you're asking this question because, and I'm going to draw some connections here, but not settle there. That's incidental. But
sure,
what comes to me and why Ted Lasso is conjured when you ask this version of question and the principles it begs to discuss.
Sure,
is, sorry, when I laugh really hard, it does something physiologically and makes my throat get weird. So apologies for the throat clearing. I think you make a really astute observation, and I'll connect the Ted Lasso thing and then leave that alone. But cynicism is what came to me, and Ted Lasso as a show is about an adult who is demonstrably and excessively uncynical, and that's sort of what made me think of it. But leaving that alone, right. But trying to directly address your question, I think that's part of it. I think part of it is because we have so dishearteningly abandoned wonder, abandoned the idea of the fantastic, so that when this is, I don't mean this to be a political statement, but what came to me while you were asking that question, and I was trying to figure out how to not sound like a dope in trying to answer it, what came to me as a person like a Greta Thunberg and climate change.
Sure.
And I don't mean to jump on that bandwagon in the moment per se, except this is a child saying to adults, a terrible thing is happening, and I need you to believe me. And ignoring all the inroads attached to that, this is what you read are asking. Like, what does it take for us to sense the and I think a lot of it is the childlikeness Christ refers to. It's condescending. It's recognizing I don't have all the information.
Yeah.
It's because dadgum, man, I've got 3 kids, and the amount of times, and the growing amount of times as they age and as I age and as life is happening, where a thing is told to me and you can see me visually, you kind of squint your eyes and you're like,
yeah,
are you telling me the truth?
Yeah. Right.
And which isn't to suggest they always are, but this attitude that gets fostered in us, honestly, because we are liars and cynics. I mean, dang, like,
yeah, right.
The ways we buy in, and I don't mean we actively intend to hurt or harm or as the word I just used, lie, but the air is full of it. And the more mature the older we are, maturity and age are different things. Yeah. The older we are, the longer we've breathed it in, the more accustomed to it we've grown, the more comfortable in it we've become.
Yeah.
The easier it is.
Sure. Yeah.
So then when a child does come along and say, this thing is doing something, there is harm afoot.
Yeah.
We just say, dumb kid. And, God willing, there will never be a scenario you or I or anyone encounters with the level of specificity of a child's story is actively possessed and harming them, and they're trying to communicate that to us and we don't believe them. But the metaphor holds, which is, what does it take to believe the fantastical?
Yes.
And I think it's childlikeness. I think it is a will and an intention to recognize that all we see isn't all there is. And if anything is most definitely not the complete story. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's a really wonderful question. And what I can't get away from the answer to is, how do you listen to children? You become like them. You become open.
Yeah,
you attune your ears. You attune your spirit. I've thought about this lately. I don't know why I did, but I work in a sales environment. I'm having a good year, which is really cool on a pure materialistic standpoint, but that drug is intoxicating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there have been moments lately where I'm like, okay, get your head out of your ass and just pay attention. Yeah. Yeah. Stop chasing the wind and look around you and drink it in. Step outside your back door with no intent beyond existing.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to be some big philosophical statement. It's the act of living is acknowledging one's existence in relationship to the space and material around you. Anyway, that's my answer to your question.
Well, and I love it. We have to become, I love the answer that we have to become like them, because that is quite comparably the advice that Christ directly gave, and said that and that's not the only reason I love the advice you give, but it resonates profoundly that's a part of what was trying to be communicated. Like, you have to be open to wonder. You have to stay curious. You have to be open to fantastical things. I was having a conversation with someone not that long ago where we were talking about the power of dreams and the importance or not of dreams, and how in many ways our dreams are just sort of our subconscious using metaphorical representations of things to try to, fathom what's going on in our life and what's going on in our hearts and minds. And the prospect when dreams coincide with a coincidental reality, and they like, for instance, you dream about someone the night before that you haven't seen in years, and then you see them, or
Sure.
you dream about an event, and then within that same week that event happens. Suddenly you're going to see the dream in a bit of a different light. And this friend and I were I don't know why I keep saying this friend. It was our mutual friend Ian. We were discussing things about just sort of that subject in general. And one of the observations that I had made to him was, I said, it has stayed with me a long time that, and this quote, though I will not be able to cite it verbatim, I remember the general spirit and interpretive spirit of it, came from M. Night Shyamalan. And I remember him saying, when he was asked about, I think it was in promotion for The Sixth Sense or something, and they asked him, do you believe in ghosts? And here was his general answer to that question. He said, what's interesting to consider is how many billions and billions, possibly into the trillions of stories throughout history of ghosts there have been. Like, literally, just an innumerable amount that would be nearly impossible to count. The amount of personal anecdotes and inexplicable experiences that relate to ghosts or aliens, or pick your fantastical subject, right? And what he asked back to this person asking the question of, do you believe in this? He said, how many of them have to be true for it to be a possible reality?
Sure.
And his answer was, of course, one. Only one out of these innumerable amounts has to be authentic for that to be a possible reality. Go ahead and throw away 98% of them. Go ahead and throw away 98% of these fantastical / miraculous / supernatural or preternatural occurrences. How many of them have to be true for this to be a possibility? Only one of them. And now suddenly that begins to for me, puts me back on my heels a little bit when I have the tendency to be dismissive of things. What we also know is that there is a need. I'll share a somewhat comical story that my son has a very vivid imagination and had a proclivity, a season that he does not as pervasively engage in right now, but definitely still occasionally sort of comes into, where he will take something he knows is pretend and talks about it like it's real.
Sure.
For instance, when he told one of his more distant cousins that he had 2 sibling sisters. He does not.
Huh.
But he was trying to just, I forget exactly what subject it was that they were talking about, siblings or something, and he began to speak as if he had 2 sibling sisters. And it was, in his mind, he knew it was pretend, but he was presenting it as if it was reality. And so there's this way in which we do have to be interrogative of the things that we're hearing. But I think there's a difference between being interrogative and being dismissive. And I think that might be a huge key when we are confronted with fantastical things or fantastical realities, particularly when we're talking about, and you went to Greta with climate change. I also had in my mind, though I didn't explicitly lay it out, the numerous cases that have more recently come to light of people who have been in positions of abuse for years, and then the victims of their abuse were not believed for X amount of time. That is not always specifically related to younger generations, as I had previously posed it, but it was in my mind. And so there are these ways that I think, for myself, I would yes and amen we have to have the curiosity and the embrace of wonder that a child brings to us. And I think we have to know the difference between interrogating and dismissing. I think we absolutely have to understand that sanity, from my view, sanity to a degree means you have to know how to ask the right questions and know how to be open to the right answers. We engage ourselves in this mystery of faith, which, despite the ways some people tend to talk about it, I don't believe fits in neat little boxes or recipes like a cookbook. I don't feel that the movement of faith is so easily quantified. And so because of that, I think the impetus is on us to ask the right questions, whether that be in a fantastical scenario like this, where a child comes and says, my doll is doing all this. The doll was on the, it's like why I got frustrated in that moment in the movie when he's like, hey, it was Chucky, is they don't even ask him why he's saying that. They don't even push it any further. They're just like, go to bed. Like, no, son. You just need to go to bed. And I'm like, why would he just come running out and say that? Like, what do you mean? Like, what makes you think that? And what a different spirit it would be. I've said before when we talked about Something Wicked This Way Comes, that one of the things I love tremendously about that book is because when those boys come to Will Holloway, Charles Holloway, when they come to Charles Holloway and present the fantastical nature of it, he believes them. And the chapter in the book calls out that Will almost bursts into tears because he simply believes them. He simply, recognizes the truth in what they're trying to express. And I think that's one thing, particularly those of us who are people of faith. But I would even challenge the skeptics among our listeners that I think there is a certain. Do you remember there's one moment in the book Creature Tech by Doug TenNapel that always stood out to me, and I believe it's from Creature Tech. I know it was a Doug TenNapel book. I'm remembering it from Creature Tech. I could be remembering it wrong, but where there's a character in it who has a big, a doctorate in science or something, has a big, educated degree and is a scientist, but is also a believer in the supernatural. And I remember, though I'm clumsily expressing it, they had said, no, it is my belief in the scientific method and in the possibilities open to us that make me open to the supernatural. Because why would I be so dismissive of things I clearly don't fully understand?
Sure.
These are all postulates and hypotheses until I can definitively, it's like the scientific method tells you can't prove a negative. Like, you can't prove this thing definitively does not exist. You can only prove positive moving things. And yet in our own lives, whether we are people of faith or people of doubt, or maybe both at the same time, I think we do have to recognize the ways in which we would be dismissive of childlike wonder and the ways that we cast that aside instead of embracing curiosity, embracing an inquisitive spirit. I believe this was just recently in a devotional that I was reading where they were unpacking the story of Nicodemus, and Nicodemus comes to Jesus, and Jesus is like, you must be born again. And Nicodemus is like, can I enter, my mother's womb? But what this particular devotion was pointing out is Nicodemus had the guts to ask the questions. And he had the guts to say, what do you mean by this? And to push on it a little bit, not in a spirit of, I'm going to, outspeak you and shut you up. But, what are you saying? Throughout the Gospel of Mark, they're constantly seeing the wonderful things that Jesus is doing or the scary things that Jesus is doing. They're constantly asking, who is this man? Who is this person? And I think I could sum up this tirade of thoughts that I'm presenting by saying, Child's Play challenges me to be more inquisitive in my own heart and mind. Ironically, perhaps, for a slasher 80s film. But it does. It pushes on some button that says, I need to not be so arrogant and narcissistic to think that I know these decisive answers, but to embrace inquisitive natures and curious natures a bit more.
Well, and not to put too find a bumper sticker on it, but maybe as a way into, even the fog meter, if we go there. But the takeaway from Child's Play is, if as a rule you disbelieve your children, it imperils you both.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. It's not just them that are at risk of our disbelieving them.
Right.
Yeah.
It would put us both in a perilous situation.
And I mean, I believe, who's going to believe me?
Oh, it's true. Oh God, it's true. And and for the sake of putting hanging a lantern on it, yes, there is, there's a very real and holy work being done in helping people who suffer from delusions. That's not what we're talking about. People who proceed from delusional mindsets require holy assistance, and they require, I call it holy because I think it's good work, but they require actual like people sort of pressing on some of that. But again, I'll say this to mirror these two things, because you put such a great button on it that you put yourself in peril. Gosh, I wish I could. Oliver Sacks is his name. He passed away several years ago. He wrote a book that I had read many, many years ago and found just incredibly compassionate and very moving, called "The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat." And
Wow.
it was a collection of stories about, working with people who suffer from certain degrees of impairment and delusion and mental illness and stuff like that. But the man Oliver Sacks wrote with more compassion than I think I've ever read anybody in that field. And so it was tremendously inspiring. But again, it was about doing that work to confront it by embracing the individual, keeping a curious spirit, guiding and walking them through it, not being dismissive.
Right.
Because when you're dismissive, to go back to your earlier point, you put yourself and them in peril. If you are utterly dismissive,
Right.
and utterly cast aside what they're, like, who's going to believe me? I'll believe you, or at the very least, I'll listen to you, and I'll believe that what you are telling me is true to you. And is it the factual reality? Let's find out together. But
There's
I will
something
listen to you. And
so sad to me about how little the idea of solidarity has embedded itself in our faith, because I do think just solidarity is we're so individualistic. We're so binary in our thinking. A person is either right or wrong, that the notion of solidarity is such a lost art. Like the way you just articulated that was very powerful to me. I will believe you on this thing. The life-giving nature that someone who is begging to be believed experiences when they are believed.
Yes.
Is to use your word, a holy act. And I would encourage all of us, you and I and listeners, to engage the week with those eyes. What does it mean to express solidarity with creation itself? If that's too big, with your neighbor. If that's too big, with your kids and spouse, your friend, you express solidarity with yourself. On and on it goes.
Absolutely.
Riri, Child's Play.
Yeah, there was Child's Play. You want to take us to the fog meter?
Sure. The fog meter is how we measure what we think of all the movies we cover on a scale of fear and God. How scary a thing is, how substantive a thing is. I'll start with fear. I think because of because of how I understood this film to be lodged in the horror canon, I think in a general sense, I didn't find it super scary. It's creepy. It's got a couple of, just the design of Chucky, the implementation of Chucky, how they withhold his visual until as long as they do. Right. How it ramps up by the end, Terminator style. Those are all worthy. So I think I'll give it a 6 on the scare meter.
Yeah. I think for myself, because I found the individual moments to be more effective than I remembered them being, really good at developing suspense, paying off suspense with genuinely kind of creepy visuals. So I'm going to be a bit generous, I think, and give it a 7.5. And then for myself, for the substance meter, again, knowing what I know with meta knowledge that the writer was intending a degree of metaphor, I think the finished product does not try very hard to unpack a significant amount of things. But I think there are things in the text of the film that don't require a lot of work or digging to pull out that are worth thinking about, worth contemplating. I think it can be enjoyed on just a slasher level, but there's also some things there if you want to look for them and see where they take you in your mind. So I'm going to be generous there too and give it a 7.
Based on your reintroduction of the halves, I'm going to go 6.5 on the substance. Right. There's not nothing. But I also think you can just enjoy the text of the film and not overthink it too.
And yes, agreed. We didn't, I'll mention this in just a second. That means that we give Child's Play, directed by Tom Holland, written by Don Mancini.
Submitted by Brent Westerink.
a 7 out of 10 on the fog meter. And yes, I think that's quite a substantive showing there. Do you recommend the original Child's Play?
Not to child Brent.
Agreed.
Or children in general, which
Certainly.
is funny. Did you notice? I don't mean to cart us away again, but in my reading about it, just the volume of protesting the film received of how it was going to induce children to violent behavior. The fact that Brent saw this as a kid, my wife referenced seeing this as a kid, like, why the hell are we showing our kids these movies? Like, what,
Right.
why are you protesting it? Are you going to show your kid Child's Play?
Right.
Then you are a problem.
It's rated R.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
meant to be
Get outta
a
here.
film for adults.
So
agreed.
do I recommend it to adults? Absolutely. It's fun.
Yeah.
It's entertaining. It's got,
Absolutely.
if you haven't seen it, it qualifies. It's worth the watch.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I would definitely recommend it. We didn't once mention it, which I feel bad about. Brad Dourif.
He's great.
He carries the weight of voicing Chucky through all 7 of the core films. He's, not the voice in the remake, but Brad Dourif delivers an outstanding performance. And yeah, it holds up.
Before you walk away from that.
Yeah.
1, he's Grima Wormtongue for my Tolkien heads.
He absolutely is.
2, he shows up as a character whose name I have forgotten, but is a seminal episode of X-Files, Team Ned, Beyond the Sea. He shows up as an antagonist for Scully, who is channeling the spirit of her father. Very good episode if you're tracking for the X-Files. Season 2, I think.
Oh, okay. Very, very well said. I think Brad Dourif does an exceptional job here, and I think Child's Play in general is where it is in the landmark. It was funny. If you're talking about the top tier of horror slashers, you're going to have Jason, Michael Myers, Freddy. I think probably and Leatherface might be on that top shelf. And then like one shelf down, you're going to have, easily like
doll.
Chucky. Yeah. Yeah. Because he's a little shorter. He can't climb to the top shelf,
No.
But no, definitely recommend it. Thank you very, very much, Brent, for suggesting this. It was long overdue for us to cover it. Hopefully you, Brent, enjoyed the conversation we had out of it. And hopefully you listeners did as well. I know I certainly did. And I want to thank you very much, Nathan, for having that conversation with me. Next week, we're going to be entering into another What Scares Us submission that also came from another listener. And this is arguably, I would contend, this might be the biggest horror landmark entry that we have yet to cover. And we finally are going to broach this legendary film. I'm not being sarcastic. People probably think I'm going to bust out with like a random sequel or something, but a legendary film directed by admittedly controversial director Roman Polanski, written by Ira Levin. We are finally going to be discussing Rosemary's Baby next week.
I'm excited. I've never seen it.
Yes. You've never seen it. Okay.
No.
Yeah. It's
Carrie Fisher's in it, right?
No.
No?
I don't believe Carrie Fisher is in it. Maybe I'm wrong. I have not seen it in years.
We're going to part ways here.
Oh boy, maybe I'm wrong. It's Mia Farrow is the main person, but I
Okay.
so
we
so
have
but I
to
don't
do this. We have
Oh
to do
no.
this.
Oh no.
Real time
Right now in real time.
IMDbing this right now. I've got 20% battery. I see you, phone.
Oh, boy.
See Rosemary's Baby.
Oh man. You could be right. It's been years since I've seen it.
Well, I'm not claiming I'm right.
Oh. Felt like you were.
No. No, well, I for some reason, there's some movie. You are correct. I do not see Carrie Fisher anywhere on the cast list.
Okay.
Phil Leeds is in it though.
I don't
know who that is.
I'm like, am I supposed to know who that is?
What's the movie I'm thinking of?
I'm
Anyway,
not sure.
Sorry,
But anyway,
sorry
so,
for the
no,
fun
that's okay.
diversion at the end of an episode.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So Rosemary's Baby next week. As we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. In that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. Thank you all, listeners. Thank you, Nathan. We'll see you next week.
Absolutely. See you guys.